So Traci is an executive coach. She calls herself the Innate Coach, and I'm sure she'll explain to us why she came up with that name. The title of her presentation today is Focused Productivity, and we need it at the beginning of a new year. Get focused, stay focused, and be motivated. And she, as I said, is an executive coach, helps leaders deal with decision-making, communication skills, especially during times of transition like today. She's part of the Women's Speakers Association and is also a coach as it relates to nutrition and health. So Traci, with no further ado, I'll leave it to you.
All right, let me share my screen here. Let's see. Oh, that's not it. Can you all see that? Good, okay. So Marie, thank you so much, and everybody for being here today. It's just on the Innate Coach piece, because I don't want to spend too much time about me. I want to be able to get into the meat and potatoes of today's presentation. But Innate Coach was actually a name that came from a client. So that was probably 2 years into my coaching. She says, wow, you really are bringing out, so much of what's innate in me. And I thought, wow, that's a great thing. I think I'll borrow that if I can. So I became the Innate Coach. But today, as Marie said, it's a great time to talk about productivity. I don't know if there's really a bad time to talk about productivity, but certainly we tend to hear about it at the beginning of a new year. So just giving you a little bit of information. This slide deck is actually going to be presented in a PDF form. I'll send it, I guess, to Marie, if that makes it easier, since you and I are already connected on email, and then you can share it with the group if that makes sense. There are going to be hyperlinks that you'll see to some of the things. I do like to provide tools and resources, so all of those will be in that PDF. So I'm going to be flying through some of this stuff for sake of time, but you can always go back and resource it if it's helpful for you. So one of the things I like to talk about in the beginning is, so we're all on the same page, is, what is the definition we're working from when it comes to, in this case, productivity? And this one was taken from the American Heritage Dictionary. And you'll see there's some highlighted words there. Our heads usually lead because that's the way we've been conditioned. Does it make sense to my brain? And so if we read this particular definition, the effectiveness of constructive effort as measured, and I can't see the rest of it, unfortunately, because it's blocked, but as measured, I think, in the rate of output to that of input. Yeah, that makes sense to our heads. Interestingly enough, most of what we're going to be talking about after this, it doesn't have so much to do with what makes sense to our heads, but what it feels like, right? So productivity is less about what we need to be, our head needs to be telling us we need to be doing, and more, how are we feeling about the task, or the project that we're working on? That is going to determine whether we can stay productive or not. So if we look at this definition, the word effectiveness, effort, measured, rate, these are all words that kind of sound clinical. And in the case of effectiveness and effort, sometimes make people sweat. It's like, oh gosh, this is going to be hard. So we have this, whether we know it or not, developed a relationship with the concept of productivity that, although we want to talk about it, there's parts of us that always feel like we don't measure up. So we really want to change that in order to be productive. So a lot of what we're going to talk today about is mindset and shifting that in order to develop a relationship with the concept of productivity so that it works for us. And this quote that you see here comes from the bottom link. It's an article by a man by the name of Adam Grant. For those of you who don't know, Adam Grant is an author, a speaker, and he's also the youngest known, well, to date, professor at the prestigious Wharton School of Business, which is one of the most well-known business schools in the world. And he has been, authoring many books around productivity, the concept of productivity. And I like his take on it. So that's why I borrowed it for a lot of what we're going to talk about today, because I'm completely on board. He said that we've really been taught for most of our lives that productivity is about time management, right? I need to really stay to something and use my time wisely. And what he says, it's not so much about time management, it's about attention management. How do we manage our attention? and what causes us to pay attention or be able to focus or not. And so one of the things from this particular quote I liked the most was he says, productivity, as much as our American culture and other cultures too, but American culture definitely has made it into a virtue, right? Busy for busyness sake. If I'm busy, that's a virtue. I'm not, practicing in sloth or, anything else that might not be virtuous. But what he says is that actually productivity is a means to an end. It isn't within itself a virtue unless the end result is worthy. In other words, unless the thing we're producing is worthy of the time and effort that it takes to produce it. So we really want to look at that a lot of times. Am I just staying busy to be busy because that's what I've been taught is important? Or am I really being productive? And so the goal, again, is more about finding ways to be excited about what it is we're doing, as well as thinking about the bigger why. How can it benefit others? And this is a perfect group of people to talk to about that, because Rotary is all about what you can be doing for your community and others, and to lift us all up. And so this is really in alignment a lot with, I'm guessing, the core values of Rotary itself. We're looking to build intrinsic motivation. I'm going to be talking about that more. But that idea of being intrinsically motivated from the inside, as opposed to extrinsically motivated by things outside of ourselves, like our boss getting angry with us if we don't get a task done on time. That would be an extrinsic motivation. And so really productivity is more about gaining that intrinsic motivation. So I put together what I felt were the essential elements to creating effective productivity. And the first one here is interest. So obviously, if we need to get ourselves intrinsically motivated, we need to be interested. So the way I kind of set all of these up is I thought about 3 or 4 questions that you can start before you're engaging in a task or a project to kind of get some clarification so that you are preparing yourself to be as productive as possible. And the first question on interest is, what do you love and enjoy? Let's just take the example of our inbox, emails. We all have them, right? Some more than others, but we all at some point have to tackle that inbox. I have yet to talk to a person who actually says that that's something they thoroughly enjoy. So usually it's something we have to do. It's not something we think about getting to do, right? Yay, I get to tackle my inbox. But if we can look at that task, if we keep putting it off and thus the inbox keeps mounting, we can really, to be more productive and get that done, we can think about it in terms of what do I enjoy? What do I love, right? Maybe not this task specifically, but for me, for example, I love authentically connecting with other people. And if I can tell myself, oh, all these emails that I get to respond to allow me the opportunity to authentically connect with all these people, then I'm thinking about the task differently. The next question is, what makes you feel purposeful? I'm sure there's other people out there like me who checking things off a box makes you feel purposeful. So even thinking about it in terms of, yay, I get to check out like these 100 emails that have been staring at me, if I could just check that off a box, I would feel so purposeful. That's the type of thing that, again, that believe it or not, creates that intrinsic motivation, because you want the prize, you want that feeling of accomplishment. And then finally, where do you think your efforts make the biggest impact? If I think about in this day and age, a lot of times I'm a pretty quick responder to emails, and I'll always get this response, thank you so much for responding so quickly. In this day and age, that's pretty uncommon. And so I think about the larger impact. If I can respond to things within 24 hours, that makes a great impact on those people. It says something about me, but it also says something about them, that they're important to me. And if I know that getting back to people in a timely manner makes them feel important, then that's something that's a bigger why that's going to intrinsically motivate me to get through that task. So a kind of a basic example, but hopefully that worked. At the bottom on all of these slides, you're going to see, again, what you can do. So I really created this deck as, a resource you can go back to and utilize when you're trying to get intrinsically motivated to be productive. So productivity essential element number 2 is skill. This is where a lot of times if we're given a task, especially by another person like our boss or, somebody else, that we want to be thinking about what is it that I'm most skilled at in this task. We always want to start with, what am I best at? A lot of times our brain will go to, oh gosh, I'm really not good at that. Like, if anything is given to me that has to do with technology, I'm always the first reaction to me, for me is like, oh God, I hope it works. But instead of focusing on that, I like to focus on my skills. So when COVID first hit, I really hadn't done a lot of Zoom trainings. I love the one-to-one in person. We're not doing those things right now. And so I really had to pivot like everyone else. And although that made me nervous at first, because like I said, I hadn't had that experience or exposure, and it wasn't what I was comfortable with, I started to really focus on what I am comfortable with. I'm a speaker. I love talking to people. I was concerned at first because it's harder to connect, at least the story I was telling myself, it's harder to connect with people over the internet than it is in person. But I've really developed that ability to continue to do that. And from what I've heard from other people is I feel just as connected with you online as I do in person. So again, focusing on what we're good at and the skill that we can bring forward, a lot of times then non-dependent upon what the task actually is, will make us more interested and therefore more ability, giving us a larger ability to focus in and pay attention to get that task accomplished. Do you believe you have the skills necessary? Now, this is another thing. Sometimes we're given a task and we're like, why am I given this? Why do I have to do this? Because I don't even think that this is my wheelhouse. Again, that goes back to looking for the skills or looking for clarification, what is it you're really expecting from me? Maybe I have skills I wasn't even thinking about that I had. But again, always thinking about the skills you can bring forward. And how do you feel about learning new skills? Sometimes, like I just mentioned, a task or a project is going to involve you doing something you've never done before or something you haven't done a lot. And so what's the story you're telling yourself? Is it a fixed mindset where, oh, I can't learn anything new. I'm never going to be good at this. Or is it more growth mindset where you're thinking, yeah, this could be exciting. This is a great opportunity to learn something new and get better at something I didn't think I could do before. So again, it's changing that mindset to fit that skill piece. And then finally, is there a resource that can be helpful for you? So that can be a person, place, thing that can help you with it. So if you're really struggling, where can you reach out? 9 times out of 10, I'll talk to people who are struggling with productivity, and it's because they have this mindset they have to do it alone. We've been very conditioned to that in our culture. It's the self-made man, self-made woman concept, and hopefully in this day and age we realize that we're better together than we are alone. And so where can you actually remind yourself if you feel overburdened by a task or it's just too much, or you're just concerned about it, or you're not being productive, where can you look for resources to help you engage and get interested and again, intrinsically motivated to do it? The third element is clarity. And this is very important because although, a lot of times people think, oh, my boss gave me this task and I know what I'm supposed to do, I just don't want to do it. Sometimes like I said, whether we know it or not, we may push something off and deprioritize it because we're actually not completely clear. Maybe we're clear as to the task itself, but maybe we're not clear to the why. Nobody likes to do tasks that don't seem purposeful, right? So really digging into more clarification, asking, I always say, if somebody gives you a task, the best thing to do is to repeat that back and say, so what you want me to do is X, Y, and Z by this time, is that correct? Because if there's any confusion, that can be dealt with right there and then. But even clarity along the lines, if you're feeling yourself waning, sometimes that's an instinctive part about you that you don't have enough clarity. You just don't know that that's what the problem is. And so constantly making sure that you're clear on it, but also even if it's a task you're giving yourself, how many times, or one of the things I learned in COVID, is that there were a lot of things I was doing pre-COVID that I really, during COVID, I was like, I couldn't do it anymore. And then when it came time to do it again, I thought, well, I don't really want to do that anymore. I don't need to do that. So again, clarity can also cover these questions of, is this a task that's important? Or even, is this a task that's important that I do? Is there some place I can maybe delegate this task because it's taking up precious time that really I could be using for other things that are more important to me and I have more skill for and more intrinsic motivation to do. So this clarity piece is all about, making sure that what we're doing is really purposeful and meaningful, and that we have all the information we need in order to do it. The fourth productivity element is scheduling. And this is a huge one, as you all could probably imagine. I find that 9 times out of 10, again, I have that ratio of 9 times out of 10 because that's usually what the ratio is on things. 9 times out of 10, people who struggle with productivity are not scheduling themselves effectively. And so one of the things is that they talk about, and they've done lots of research on this, is circadian rhythms and the natural biorhythms that individuals have. So for example, if you're a morning person, tasks that take a lot of focused effort should be done in the morning. Obviously the opposite if you're a night person. So finding that right fit for you to do a particular task is incredibly important. Most people are struggling because they're trying to do a task or a project during a time that is not ideal for them. So that's number one. Have you set aside the time in your schedule and created boundaries around this time? That's a big one, especially for those of us who are working at home, which is most of us right now. If you have children, if you have other distractions, have you scheduled a way to ensure that those distractions, if you start on a project or task, are not going to distract you? And is there time allotted for this particular task, or are you just trying to squeeze it in between other things? So really making sure that there's a time allotted and that you have a boundary around that time, which the next question is, am I making the time, to see to the needs that I have for the task are taken care of? If there's any pre-tasks that need to get done, which can also come up in the clarity department, if we really start to break it down, what do I need for this task? What time do I need? What resources do I need? What maybe pre-preparation tasks or projects do I need to do before I dig into this one? All of that, if we do that beforehand, these are not going to be things that, jumble us up during the actual task at hand, which can slow down our productivity. And then finally, do I have a backup plan? So one of the things I like to say about scheduling, if I were to send any of you a link to my calendar right now, you would see openings from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. That's not my work day. My work day is actually 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. But the reason you don't see the 8 to 10 time or the 4 to 5 is because I always have those blocked off. The reason for that is if anything happens, if I need to reschedule a client for whatever reason, something comes up, a task takes longer than I thought it was going to, all of these things need extra time. And if I don't have them already blocked in my schedule, it may be weeks before I can get back to that because I have a pretty, as most of us, we're pretty busy. So make sure you have places to move things. So if something does come up, okay, you're boundaried around a time, but an emergency comes up, what are you going to do? You need to bump something, but you don't want to wait 2 to 3 weeks to do it. You want to make sure that you have those time periods to work with. Essential element number 5, I was talking about this at the beginning, is mindset. Fixed and growth mindset, a little bit of background around that. There's actually a great resource book called Mindset. It's by Dr. Carol Dweck. She took decades worth of research from Stanford University, where she taught and researched around our mindset. She said that human beings tend to go between 2 types of mindset. Fixed, which is it's got to be this way. It's always this way. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, that kind of concept. To growth mindset, which is the opposite. I can learn anything. The sky's the limit. Just because I don't know now doesn't mean I can't learn. It's a much more open way of approaching things. And so again, if you find yourself in fixed mindset for whatever reason, it's not that it's bad or wrong. It's just, it's not conducive to the best productivity and taking on a task. So if you're for whatever reason, you're triggered, you're in a state, something happened in your life, or you're just not feeling it, don't try to take on a new task, because until you can really shift to a growth mindset, that task is going to take you 10 times longer and you're not going to be productive, because we need that growth mindset to be productive. Do I feel empowered or disempowered by this task? Sometimes when things are given to us, we feel like it's being maybe thrust upon us because the other person doesn't want to do it. I actually have a great example of that from a client a couple of years back. She used to get these particular tasks given to her by her boss. And she shared with me, like, this really bothers me. I feel like he's just doing this because he doesn't, I know I'm working for him, but it's just one of these tasks that I feel is just pawned off on me. And I don't like that. And when we started talking about this, I asked her to clarify with him. And what she found out was actually that he says, I give these tasks to you because you're far better at it. I think you're more skilled. I think you do a better job. And so here she's been telling herself a disempowered story all this time, when really it is one that could empower her. So again, all the things that we talked about before, getting that clarity, making sure we have all the information that we need can keep us from telling stories that are not true and that disempower us when it comes to a particular project or task. What am I communicating to myself about this task? if we're in that mental space of, I can't do it, this is too hard, nobody else wants to do this, why do I have to do it? We're probably not going to be as productive. We're certainly not going to have intrinsic motivation. So again, it's about shifting our story. And if we are telling a story that's disempowering us, where can we start to shift and change that story into something that does empower us and intrinsically motivate us? And then finally, the last element is value. Everybody on the planet wants to know that they have value, right? I think if you ask anybody, do you know you have value? I know I have value, but a lot of times we don't act like we do, or we question it. And so knowing that we have value in a situation, and that what the work that we're doing on a particular task is indeed valuable, is important. And so as is the value of the task. So again, the things that we're going to get most excited about are the things we give great value to. So when we can really, again, preemptively think about the value a task has for us and how it has for the greater good, let's say, the greater population, who else benefits from me doing this task, and really get into that, get connected with that. As silly as that sounds, once we sit down to do the task, we're going to be so much more productive. So the valuable part is, again, how am I valued in this? How are others valuing this task? But what is the value of the task itself? And then also the value trade. One of the things I always like to point out, and it's very controversial, is that we've been told it's better to give than receive. And I say that that's not true. If we just give, and don't get anything back to fuel our tank, we have nothing to give. So it's actually the equal and opposite give and take, or give and receive, is incredibly important. So if you're a giver and you're like, no, I don't need to receive, that's actually not true. Start allowing yourself to receive support, receive praise, receive whatever, because it fuels you up to have more to give to others. So one of these things is thinking about, what do I get from this? And I don't mean from a egotistical kind of way, but what do I get from doing this task? I get the knowledge that I was able to contribute to this particular group project, or whatever that is. Getting clear in your mind about that, of the value that you're bringing, is so important, because you're going to bring it so much more enthusiastically and so much better if you do. So I know that we're pretty much at time, but I did want to just mention these resources and tools. Each of these is something I give separate talks on, because it's so extensive. So if you want more information about any of these things, just let me know, or let Marie know, and she can contact me. But self-empowerment is such a big thing. We hear different things talked about it. And, Harvard Business Journal has written a lot of articles more recently about the importance of creating an empowered workplace and that type of thing. But these triangles that you see were created. The dreaded drama triangle was actually created in the late 1960s by a man named Stephen Karpman, who was a clinical psychologist. And he did it as a way to kind of explain these dynamics that play out between these roles that he chose, which were victim, rescuer, and persecutor, and how when we're kind of disempowered, we fall into these roles, and how with others that creates these certain dynamics that keep us in these roles. Later in the early 1980s, a man by the name of David Emerald came along and created the antithesis to the dreaded drama triangle. If you don't want to be in that, how do you become empowered? And that was, he called the TED triangle, or the empowerment dynamic triangle. This is where we learn how to shift from victim to creator, right? That mindset shift, from persecutor to challenger, and from rescuer to what he calls coach, I call supporter, right? So where we're persecuting people, not maybe intentionally, to get them to do something, where can we do it more effectively and challenge them in a healthy way? And where we're rescuing people, which can be enabling, where can we instead support them to empower themselves? So again, great information. You want more, just let me know. Communication is vitally important when it comes to productivity, even with yourself. If you're the only one doing the task, if you're communicating effectively with yourself and telling the right stories, it makes all the difference. Some of my favorite tools on good communication, especially when it comes to those really tough things called crucial conversations or difficult conversations, that most people think of, as challenging, so they don't want to engage in, you look up Dare to Lead, which is a book by Brene Brown, who's a clinical or a social researcher and author. She's best known for her TED Talks on vulnerability and shame. But she did a great job coming up with what she calls rumble language, which is effective ways to talk about difficult things. Another book is Crucial Conversations, which actually is an entire program. But the book itself, again, talks about ways in which to approach those conversations that are more challenging in ways that can bring connectivity, because that's really what good communication is about, is being able to connect with another or with others. And then finally, Will the Real Me Please Stand Up is the final book that I really like. And they also spell out good ways to approach not just challenging conversations, but effectively communicating so that the other person feels connected with. And then these tools and resources are the 90-minute time blocks. It comes from research around the best way to be productive when it comes to a task is working in 90-minute sprints, is what they call them, to take 90 minutes of focused attention, take then 45 to 90 minutes off as rest, and then go back to it. The research shows you don't want to do more than 2 of these a day because we cannot sustain attention for longer than that. And you might just not have time for that in general. But all of this research and these hyperlinks all talk about, how to do this, how to set up a 90-minute sprint. At the bottom of this page too, there's this thing called Focusmate. For those of you who really want an accountability buddy, I've actually had a client use this. You can go online. It's kind of like a dating service type of thing where you go pick somebody from anywhere in the world, and you show up, I guess, in a Zoom kind of chat situation. You each share what you're going to be working on for a period of, let's say, 45 minutes. And you can either hop off while you're working on it or stay with the Zoom open and work on your thing for 45 minutes and then come back and share what did you get accomplished, what didn't you get accomplished, and how could you maybe do it better the next time. And so it allows you to literally have that accountability buddy in front of you when you're trying to do a task. So this is just a summary of what to do. First of all, breathe. Remember, you're in the driver's seat. Anytime we are not productive, it's usually because we're distracted for reasons that make us feel like we're not in the driver's seat when it comes to whatever it is we're trying to be productive with. And just take things because there's lots of tools and resources, and just, go looking for those instead of just trying to hammer yourself through it using willpower. Also focus less on the concepts of being effective and efficient, which is time management, and more on getting defined in your what, how, and why. What am I doing? How do I need to do it? And why am I doing it? That is the attention management. Create a story that's going to empower you. Make sure you're clear on what's expected of this particular task or project, and communicate any feedback and confusion or needs that you have around it, even if it's with yourself. And figure out when is your most productive time of the day. How do you work? What's best for you? As well as making a plan that allows you to schedule the time blocks and try out the 90-minute sprints. I have yet to find a person who it hasn't worked for. And then final, just want to leave you with this thought by Adam Grant on productivity. He says that he's found that productive people don't agonize about whether to put their efforts into saving the world or enjoying it. They actually go after both desires simultaneously, gravitating towards projects that are personally interesting and socially meaningful, which I think applies to your group. So thank you so much for having me. And I don't know if there are any questions or if we have time for it, but certainly have time myself.
Yeah, I have a question. A lot of people during COVID are working remotely. Mm-hmm. Is there any data and focus on data on the productivity of people working from home versus working in the office?
Yes, absolutely. And that's a great question. Productivity and some of the things I hit on, as we gravitated into our homes to work, the first thing that most people found was the biggest, challenge, other than just not being with others, because we're so accustomed, to working with others face to face, were the distractions of having everybody else at home. Also, the distractions of not necessarily having a workspace. Some people had home offices already, other people didn't, and they were working at their kitchen table. And so the data that obviously, if this is a new thing they've been collecting over the last year around productivity, really drives home the points that I made today, is that we have to be even more, where we could go into the office before and the environment was kind of created for us, as well as the habitudes around, what was created for us. And we knew we could rely on going into our office and closing the door or whatnot, how things were set up in a day for us. We've had to become more creative, but also, more responsible and accountable to staying with the things that we know work best. So everything I mentioned today speaks to what is absolutely more crucial than ever when it comes to being productive at home, because we're now responsible not only for getting the work done, but for creating the environment that had once been created for us.
But are people more, less equally productive at home?
Less is what they found so far, that they've been less. And that's why this is so important, is because people we didn't know what to expect. Right. So, but we didn't know, we don't know what we don't know. And so when we suddenly try to have the same productivity that we had at work at home with all of the other variables at play, we realize we actually have to be a lot more focused and disciplined. And many people hadn't practiced that, so yeah, across the board, the research that's been coming out is that people are far less productive in general. I mean, obviously there's individuals who, buck the norm, but that's what they're finding.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question.
David, aren't you retired?
Yes, sir.
Does productivity matter anymore?
Actually, that's interesting. I was thinking about that as Traci was talking. And there are some things that I am doing, in terms of projects, and things around motivation, they motivate me. They have an impact, I believe, and I've had feedback from others that it's impacting them. So the things that I choose to do in retirement are things that are keeping me engaged, satisfied, motivated. There's a whole bunch of other things that I have less than zero interest in becoming involved in. And I've learned just to say, no, I've no interest. So I think a lot of what Traci's saying still applies to me in retirement. I don't know if it applies to everybody in retirement, but certainly it applies to me.
Well, you said something really interesting, David, which is the things you're interested in. It can go either way when people retire, right? We've heard the stories that people retire and they finally dig into the things they've been wanting to do when they weren't retired. Other people can go the opposite direction, where they suddenly don't feel valuable, or because they don't have those things that, they have really either tapped into or thought about that are intrinsically interesting to them or motivating. So for people, you're probably, I wouldn't say more productive. I don't know how productive you were when you weren't retired, but again, to the points that we're talking about here, when it comes to intrinsic motivation, anything that we're intrinsically motivated by, we're going to be more productive doing. So getting things accomplished, if we think about productivity in terms of getting things accomplished.
So that actually leads to another question. I believe that all of my career, I was intrinsically motivated. I always used to say, I don't need someone to tell me what to do. I just go do it. But when you think about what you teach, what you do as a coach, how effective is it in turning people around? Because people have to be motivated to become motivated in a way. And I've been through so many corporate training programs in my career, in my life. I just blow them off now. But all the same, is that a challenge? I mean, how do you do that? You get 20 people in a class, and what do you get? 1, 2, 3, 4 who actually take it away and do something, or do you get 18, 19, 20?
Well, that is probably the question, the best question that we could ask, is that how ready are we and how interested are we? So one of the things, if anybody ever hires me to do a training for, within a corporate environment, I always ask, does everybody want this? It's my first question. Does everybody want this? Or are you telling them they need to take this class?
Yeah.
Right? What is their natural level of interest? Because again, nobody's going to hire me as a coach who doesn't want to be coached, right? You're not going to get someone who says, I don't need this, go and hire a coach, right? So there's a certain level already of people who, and I do more one-to-one coaching than I do group stuff. And so I don't really have a problem with that. People are already motivated because they're paying me right out of their own pocket, to help them get better. And so that's the piece that you absolutely nailed, which is there has to be this level of intrinsic motivation. We can sit there and give everybody the best, protocol, step-by-step list of things to do to whatever it is you want to do, right? Become more creative, become more motivated, become more productive. But if they don't want it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
So again, part of today's conversation and what they found, and what Adam Grant has found in his research, is that productivity, again, we can't teach people. You've said it. We've taught people. There are books written on time management. There's the ideal process has already been found, right? But the reason why, if it was only about knowing better and doing better, we would all be doing perfectly. But that's not the case. What gets in the way of knowing it, but not doing it, is exactly what we're talking about here, is that intrinsic motivation. So what motivates you? And the only person who can motivate you is you.
That's true. Corporations can provide the environment in which motivation can flourish, but they can't motivate you.
Correct.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Traci, I appreciate you being here. I'm not really a question, but just a comment as I hear your words. I think back to some mentors I've had in the past, coaches, if you will. And one time, one of my mentors told me, "You're exactly where you want to be," and that hit me like a ton of bricks, because it was like I was fighting through a problem that I just kept not being able to change. And he's like. And I said, I want to change, but he's like, "You're exactly where you want to be. And if you want to be somewhere else, then you'll do something about it. You'll find that motivation to get over the hump and do it." But it does come down to that personal willpower and discipline a lot of times to get there. So thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I think that is probably the best perspective, what your mentor shared with you, because that is absolutely true. I say that to clients all the time. And usually when we're, most frustrated, we're just at the point of breakthrough, right? Yeah. When we have that real, just like hitting our head against the wall kind of frustration. I say that if you stop, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
But if you keep going, you'll break through. There's something you'll break through. And so again, whether it's good or whether it's bad, it's happening for a reason. It's teaching a lesson. It's giving you something you need. Like somebody was saying, "Oh, I think last year prepared me for this year." Well, yeah, that's true all the time. Yesterday prepared us for today. Right. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's a perspective that, anybody hearing this can benefit from, because we forget that oftentimes. Thank you.
And just to build on what you said about scheduling your life so you can be productive, David found yesterday an article in Fast Company that was discussing a PR company, and they had the creatives versus the sales dudes, and how they're very different mindsets. And they basically were interrupting the creatives' think time because the sales dudes needed some information. And so basically what they did is they set up blocks of time during the day that allowed the creatives the time to get into the groove and to be able to do their creative work. And the marketing folks and the salespeople were told, you cannot contact them during this time. And you also, the expectation of you don't need an immediate response by email or by Slack or by text. It is within this 24-hour period or whatever it was that they came up with. But I thought that was useful. It's like really, truly guard your creative and your productive time based on your biorhythm and use that to your advantage. I think that's important.
Well, Marie, you just mentioned something that's absolutely critical, and that's the creative process. And all research will show the creative process takes time, and it can't always be a time management schedule time kind of thing, because, when does creativity or insight or inspiration hit us? It's usually in times that we're not, managing our time around that particular piece. In other words, we're on a walk or we're in the shower or we're doing something where we're not managing our time. Right. So it's a very expansive energy. For those of you who study quantum physics, right? Everything's energy, and creativity is a very expansive energy. When we try to constrain something that's expansive, it doesn't work. right? So giving ourselves that, and that's why that 90-minute block piece that they found works, because it's enough time that it gives people to get into what's called the flow state. And that's when we're most creative.
Great. Thank you.
I'm just so impressed that Marie actually reads the stuff I sent to her.
I don't always, but don't tell them that.
Fast Company, they put out some good stuff.
Yes.
They do. Okay, so Traci, we appreciate your time here with us, and we will send you a virtual certificate of appreciation. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And I'll send that on to you, that PDF, so people can have